So we're going to continue our scanning up and down. Now the wind is activating the mic. I wonder, did you find the skin, flesh, and bones of interest? Anybody? Yeah. Kind of seems to spark certain ways of seeing and does invite the mind to go deeper in a certain way. So this practice follows upon the other one in the sequence that was compiled called the Teaching on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. We're still in the realm of the body, but I'd just like to say that we're also activating the mind. We're kind of reconfiguring the way we live in our body, the way we perceive it habitually, and inviting our consciousness to connect with the body in a different from the habitual way. So sometimes we can dislodge, certain kinds of fears or certain kinds of perceptions. Some are very delightful, what we see, like noticing that a moth has a moth's body, for example, something like that. The world can start to sort of shake and sparkle in good ways, but it can also shake and sparkle in ways that feel more disturbing, but they're all activations of the meditation practice that tends to sort of intensify things. And as you look at things from different angles, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of yourself taken from an unfamiliar angle and you almost don't even look like yourself. You say who's that? So there's a quality of something almost like courage that's required as much as the gentleness and the tenderness and the humor with this to keep going and be willing to keep opening and always revert to compassion and kindness whenever you can. If your mind starts to feel disturbed, you can kind of appreciate that it's part of the meditation process to learn how to relate to times when we feel less in balance. And actually, I notice there's this wrathful-looking deity over here, and that's the enlightening Buddha of what happens when things get shaken up, familiar patterns sometimes when, can feel different. So in order to become awakened, sometimes we need to get unbalanced. And here we have, naked guy, which is where retreat is about intimacy. So having a naked Buddha in front of us is interesting for that. Bear. So in the last iteration, we started at the top of our heads, and we went down to our toes with the skin. We went up through the flesh and down through the bones. So we find ourselves now again in our toes. This is a sequential exercise that I learned from Bhikkhu Analayo, who's going to move to the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. He's one of the most productive, intelligent Buddhist scholars and practitioners who's at work today. He's really combed through the ancient texts, tried to discover what's most essential and worth teaching. He also spends half the day every day in meditation, so people who've driven him from the airport report that he puts on a blindfold because he has to fulfill his hours and he doesn't talk to you in the car if he needs to do his sitting that time. Then you're just picking up Analayo and he meditates in the back seat without socializing. He's a very dedicated person. So this is kind of his system, just to let you know where it comes from. And he's distilled it in a way that makes it quite workable. So using this body scan, which has been a part of insight meditation practice at least since the late 1800s. I'm not sure about before that, but I know of that lineage as it came from Burma through Sayadaw U Ba Khin. There was a farmer guy who started following a monk around who was one of the first people in the modern era to be taught meditation, and that branched into lots of Burmese forms, including mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is Burmese meditation in disguise, and includes the body scan, starting from the feet going up to the head, for various reasons. We can get into that later. But so now we're down in our toes together, so let's everybody find the tips of our toes, and we were looking at the bones on the innermost level of our anatomical scan. And now we're going to sort of almost go deeper with our microscope or more elemental So if you have just a sense of the boniness in your toes by whatever intuitive or imaginative or felt sense you can get that your toes have bones in there, now let yourself know that the bones are mineral. They're sort of like rocks. And the composition of our bones, although they are living tissue, it's composed of all these chemical elements that's bound together in a way that's actually rather hard. So what we explore with these elemental contemplations of the body is both that the components of the body are mineral and they're part of the earth, that they actually come from the earth through plants and through what we eat and through various chemical interactions with the elements that are around us. And they also come and go, like they're temporarily taking the shape of a body, but as the Bible says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, they won't be a body always, so we don't own this. So sensing the toes, the other thing about the earth, this is called earth element, it's expressed in the felt sense of softness and hardness. So it requires a sort of subtlety to feel that there's hardness inside our body, but you might feel it close to the surface of your body where your foot is touching the cushion. As you move up through the bones of your foot, just feeling hardness and letting yourself know that the components of the bones are minerals like rocks and stones and earth. And it may be that you have a sense of mineralness or hardness and softness that's not confined to the bones. We just use the bones as a kind of basic reference point. Move up through the legs, kind of appreciating and sensing into the stiffness, the hardness of the shins and the knees. And the thigh bones, long, very strong bones. And here, if you have any metal plating in your legs or artificial joints and screws, those are also very mineral, quite obviously. If there's plastic pieces in there, that comes from petroleum. It's also ultimately earth-based element. So as Pat was saying, these meditations are a little bit creative. We're reconfiguring, so let your mind play with this. Sense just the two legs together and the shape that they're in. And feel the hardness and firmness of the pelvis. The little tailbone and sacrum. You can go up the spine, knowing it's composed of minerals. Might even just touch on how life incorporated inanimate stuff. So the bony spine, the ribs, rib cage. Maybe that your sense of the shape of the bones and stuff doesn't stay completely clear. That's all right. Just as you're feeling the hardness, acknowledging the mineral earthiness of the body. the shoulder blades. And the collarbones. Those big knobs at the top of the shoulders. You don't have to come to an exact anatomical understanding, just to feel and sense in whatever way is direct for you. You feel down the arms, the bones and the joints there. Down to the hands. This earth element is really critical in keeping the parts of the body in their shapes. Otherwise we'd all be blobs like amoebas. And we'll go back to the neck area and go up. It's quite easy to sense hardness in your teeth, like you could tap them or grit them together a little bit if you want to. And just sensing the bony hardness of the skull. So we've completed this contemplation of the earthy mineral nature of the skeleton and maybe other parts of the body, the hardness. Just want to say that earth is sometimes also soft. But that quality of hardness and softness, those gradations are on the felt level, which is a little bit different from the picturing and understanding level, the perception level. That's the earth element. You might say to yourself that you've looked at the whole skeleton and that you've acknowledged the earthiness of it. Not so different from gravel and sand. Now we're going to come just a little bit outward into the softer area, the same fleshy component of the body that we studied in its anatomical side, where the blood and the fat and the softness is. And we're going to think of, as we go down the body, the wateriness of the body, which is pretty much in this fleshy area between the skin and the bones. To say that in the evolution of human beings, we used to be fish and our blood is still salty, just like the ocean was. We're actually carrying the ocean in us still. Actually, the fish kind of invented our spine and ribs, but that's kind of going back to the skeleton. But feeling into the brain and the cheeks and the saliva in your mouth. Saliva is a great place to feel the wateriness of our bodies. And with wateriness, it's quite easy to feel and remember that the water comes in and goes out. Comes in usually through the top of our body and goes out through the bottom. So we are rather like a bag in a way. So sensing the wateriness in the head. And you can move down through the throat area and some of the structures of the throat that exist to carry water up, wateriness, blood up into the head and down into the lower areas of the body. wateriness is actually what makes the earthiness of the body stick together. Like as, let's say, as we die and the body dries out, it would eventually turns into dust. We're kind of like mud, textured because of all the water in there. Following the general trend down through the shoulders, the muscles of the shoulders with the blood and other liquids that are part of the body. And sensing the arms like long and heavy water balloons with fingertips at the end that are also shaped like little watery bags. Intuitively sensing how the water and the moisture brings the elements together in the body, keeps the body kind of moist. Sensing down through the upper part of the torso. It's the lungs and the heart. Feeling and finding an understanding of wateriness. Feeling down into the belly area. You might get a clear sense of wateriness if you contemplate the bladder and all that sort of plumbing, almost like a faucet at the bottom, that the bottom of one of those kind of water things at a construction site with the little button that you push and the water comes out. You might feel into that. That's like. This water is not separate or different from the waters of the earth or the waters of our atmosphere. It flows through us, purifying, transporting things, with things in suspension, minerals in suspension. Different kinds of liquids in the body, clear ones and colored ones. Move down the legs through the flesh. Sensing the wateriness in the muscles and the blood vessels, down to the feet and the toes. It may be that some places feel like there's a kind of absence of water, like they're dry. That's also a kind of way that the wateriness shows itself, is sometimes by being, you might feel there's not really enough water and the parts of your feet are scaly-ish, like that. You can feel too. So here we are in the toes. You can just glance up the body and sense the wateriness of it. Whatever way is most available for you. Now we'll go to the surface of the body where the element, what's called fire, but we can experience as changes of temperature. Our skin is what mostly tells us about coolness and warmth. So when you're down in your feet, are they cool, are they warm, are they somewhere in between? Just noticing the interplay of the body and the environment along this theme, let's say, of fire or temperature energy, heat energy. This comes to us really from the sun. All the body's energy is from the sun and from plants and animals, so it's not separate from the energy of even the cosmos, let's say. So sensing up the legs, along the surface of the body, or maybe that you feel it inside too, but it's very convenient that we have skin and there's temperature sensors there to keep us alive by helping us interpret the environment. Sense the skin of the thighs, up to the lower torso. Maybe there's a sense of pleasure at the delicate warmth in different places on the skin, or a slight dislike of coolness or something like that. It's okay. Just see if you can sense what the energy of temperature is like for you. And come up through the torso, all along the skin, so sides and front and back. Maybe some warmth in the armpits. And sensing the shoulders. Some of us may be feeling really hot, some may be feeling too cold. It's quite individual and sensitive, our body. Sense down the arms. There's this kind of neutral area of fire which is feels neither too warm nor too cold, but can invite us to be more subtle as we practice in a sort of slightly warm. Goldilocks. It's just right. And the hands may be cooler or warmer on one, the upper or lower, like the palms may be cold and the backs may be warm, or vice versa. We use the word fire, and it's a traditional word, but it's also a direct experience. And we'll meet at the neck and go up just over the surface of the scalp and the face, the ears. At the top of the head, we'll say we've scanned the body through the experience of the fire element or temperature energy, knowing that it's something elemental that's connected to the atmosphere, that's part of the energy of this unfolding life. last of the elements that we'll examine together is the element of air. For that, we'll just notice the breathing. For some of us, it might feel accessible or interesting to consider that the body has gases all through it, different kinds of airs, and oxygen suspended in the blood, and different kinds of digestive gas. All of this is part of the Earth's atmosphere. Enters the body and leaves the body. Stays inside for different periods of time. There's one more detail traditionally about air, which is that it's also considered to be the element of movement in the body, as people observed that wind moves things like prayer flags and moves things like leaves. And in the same way, the air moves our chest and belly up and down. Movement is one of those things that our body and mind are able to feel and understand. As the air moves in and out of the body, you can acknowledge that also as movement itself, as the felt sense of the air. So this completes the contemplation of the four great physical elements through our body. You can understand that the elements do not strictly belong to us, that they're shared with other beings who have breathed this air, who've maybe swum in the water that we end up drinking. Perhaps the minerals of our body have been part of other bodies. And certainly they were all created actually at the beginning of the universe, very old. The carbon in our body is from the beginning of time. So the contemplation of the elements includes this sense of not being the owner, that the experience of being composed of elements is something that we share with all beings and all that exists. And just see how it affects you to contemplate the body in this way. What does the mind feel? Time for our refreshing break. I'd like to complete the meditation in the standing pose. There's just about, not very much longer, 10 minutes or so. You could experiment with that. Feel free to play with any of the contemplations. It's good to sort of do them in order. So if you could just be with the skin if you want to, or the skeleton, or one of the elements. Or you might like to just stay in embodied presence and sense the breath a bit. Whatever feels like the next right thing. to be able to hear the silence in the room.